Good morning. Good morning. You can unmute so that you can respond so that we hear if you guys can hear me or not.
Morning, sir. Morning.
We can hear you there.
Morning, sir.
Oh, sihle.
You guys you now want to greet each other. You had all the time to do so. You had all the time to do so when I was not yet in.
Unmute your brother.
Okay, so I'm just uploading the slides so that we can start.
This is TK. Kai ngivuleke mayikhandi yazi ivakala kanjani.
Hayi mani kuyekuthetha nina. Ngithini ke ngoku? Okay, so apologies for logging in a bit later. We were in a meeting that started at 9 and I had to leave before it actually ended so that we can be together and we can have this particular lecture because it is important for us. It is really important for us. So when we met in the very first lecture, I remember we discussed what we were going to cover in this particular semester. And if you still remember, what I said then was that we are going to cover only 3 chapters. That is chapter 11, which is operations management, chapter 12, which is human resources management, and chapter 13, where we are mainly focusing on marketing management. If you are not speaking, please, it will be important that you mute your mic so that we will not hear what we are not supposed to be hearing. If you want to say something, if you want an opportunity to speak, there's an icon for raising a hand. You can use that one. Then we will be able to see who needs time to speak, and we'll give you the opportunity to do so. I'm not sure if you guys will be using videos because that will affect others who may not be on campus in terms of data. So I was saying the last time we met, we discussed that we are covering chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13. Basically, operations management, human resources management, and marketing management. I'm sure also you guys know me. My name is Tendai, my surname is Chimcheka, and I'm a lecturer in business management. I introduced myself in the previous lecture, but then there were fewer people than I see today. So it's important that we know each other. I also encourage you to log on to Blackboard as you did today and introduce yourself in the discussion forums as you are required to do so. It's part of participation. It may affect your marks because we will look at participation level, both in terms of participation in the sessions, participation in the discussions, participation in tutorials, and so forth. So it is important that you complete every task that you are given to complete. Okay, so we will move on straight to chapter 11, which is operations management. And in this chapter, basically, these are the learning outcomes as per the textbook, but however, you should focus mainly on the learning outcomes in your learning guide, which I believe each and every one of you has already received. So in this chapter, we'll basically look at the introduction. We will also look at the operations management model, the classification of process types for manufacturers and for service providers, operations design, operations planning and control. Then we'll also look at how operations can be improved, which is operations improvement, and that will be the end of the chapter. So in terms of operations management, basically what we are looking at here is that particular function in an organization which focuses mainly on the transformation of inputs into output. For example, we are looking at that particular function in the organization, or that particular specialized area in the organization, which focuses mainly on how resources or inputs are converted into output, which would then be products or your services. So for purposes of this course, it is also important for you to know the differences between products and services. And I'm sure that is also stated clearly in your textbook, the 11th edition, which we are using, that products are tangible, whereas services may be intangible. Products, you can visibly see them, you can visibly touch them, which you cannot do in terms of services. But focusing mainly in terms of production, when it comes to products, those they can actually be produced and be kept in a warehouse or in a storehouse, which cannot be done also in terms of services, which are supposed to be offered and consumed at the very same time. Like the process of them being rendered and them being enjoyed is actually takes place simultaneously. We will look into that a bit more in detail as we proceed. Then in terms of classification of process types, we will look at that for both manufacturers and for service providers. And for manufacturers, we are looking at those that produce products that we can visibly see, that we can visibly touch. And for service providers, it's those services that are rendered which we cannot visibly see, which we cannot visibly touch. So they are classified in different ways. And for purposes of this course, it is important for you to know how process types that lead to the manufacturing of products can be classified. So there you will find in your textbook, you have jobbing processes, project processes, batch processes, mass processes. You need to be able to explain and discuss all those and distinguish them from each other. We also have continuous processes, which are also used in the manufacturing of products and services, in the manufacturing of products. Then in terms of services, if you read in your textbook, you will also see that they can be classified into three, where we have mass services, we also have service shops, and professional services. So it will be important for you when you are reading your textbook to also have an understanding of that and how those three differ from each other. In terms of operations planning and controlling, there you ought to know the steps that are followed in operations planning, steps that are followed in operations control. You will also need to know issues to do with operations quality, issues to do with quality, which we will also speak to when we look at operations improvement. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Anyone wants to ask a question? Apelele. Liam, don't you have questions? We need you guys to be asking questions. Okay, guys, if there are no questions, then that is it for operations management. Tomorrow we will focus on human resources management. The test for operations management, you write it next week. Is that fine with everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So you read this chapter, you prepare for the test. Your test will be out of 100. And all the best. Hello?
Sorry, sir. I think next week we have a test.
Oh, okay, so you need it today. Do you need it today? Guys, respond.
No. No, sir. You don't need it today.
Okay, guys. So, in terms of test dates, please see the test dates in your learner guide. We already have test dates in your learner guide. I'm sure you guys already saw them. So don't say we caught you by surprise. Your test dates are already in your learner guide. So you need to prepare about those. I was joking when I said we have a test next week or today. I just wanted you guys to contribute to this discussion and also to hear if there. I wanted you guys to participate and also to hear if we are still together, because it's another thing to be speaking from here. It's another thing for people to be hearing you and to be following. So moving on to the operations management, I think it is important to also understand that it's important for every organization and for every business to have an effective and an efficient operations management process. So most businesses, if not all, they are actually involved in converting inputs into output. And there is need for that to be effective and for that to be efficient. So for a business management student, it is important to know that there is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, especially for an operations management student like you. You need to know the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. When someone is asking about where do we find the guidelines for tests and assignments, those are on Blackboard. When you log on to Blackboard and you go to content, you will see a folder for your with important information and learning guides. So if you read that one, you'll get all the information. Coming back to the lecture, I was saying it's important for a business management student to know the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. So in terms of effectiveness, we're just looking at whether an operations process was able to achieve what it was meant to achieve. Did the process allow the organization to attain its goals? But when we are looking at efficiency, we're looking at whatever that was done, was it done to the best level? Was it the best possible way that was used? So in terms of production, we will not only be looking at whether a product was produced, but we should also look at whether the best processes were used to produce a certain product. In that process, did it reduce waste? Did it not waste time? Because those are the resources that we're looking at. So there's you do not only need to focus on effectiveness, but you should also focus on efficiency. So normally there is that question on why should businesses have an effective and efficient operations management process. And one of the reasons why that is important is that it helps the organization to reduce costs. Because if you use the best possible ways to produce products or to convert inputs into output, it helps you to save on costs. If you produce products that do not have too much defects, where you do not make a lot of mistakes, it helps you to save on costs or to reduce on costs. Then the other reason is an increase in terms of revenue. So in terms of revenue, when we say it helps to increase revenue, we're basically saying this also brings sort of a marketing advantage, whereby if you produce products that are of good quality, there are no defects, there are no mistakes that are made in the process, you can sell those products at a higher price, and customers will still be willing to buy them. So you can sell them at a premium. If you sell them at a premium, you'll be able to earn more in terms of revenue, because revenue, this is basically income which you calculate by multiplying the number of units that were sold by the price that you are selling for each unit. Besides the issue of selling products at a higher price, revenue can also be increased by people being willing to buy your products because they've heard about it. They've heard those who used the product speaking positively about that product, and they may want to use that particular product. So that will also increase the number of units that are sold, and obviously will end up increasing your revenue. Effective and efficient operations management processes will also help you to reduce the amount that is needed for investment, especially if you choose to use innovative ways, if you choose to use the best possible means to produce products. It helps you to actually invest less than what would be invested if you were to use ordinary, normal methods of production, where you do not focus mainly on costs and also on income that you make. It also helps to provide the impetus for new innovation. It provides room for new ways of doing things. So that is the impetus for new innovation. It's basically new ways of doing things. It provides that room for new ways of doing things. Effective and efficient operations management processes, they also help to improve on productivity in an organization where you can actually produce more output with less resources. You can be able to produce more output using less resources. Guys, are there any questions? Any questions?
No.
Oh, okay. So we move on to defining terms that are used in operations management. The terms that are used in operations management, as I said earlier, it is important for every operations management student, every business management student to know that there is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, but you also ought to know, you also ought to be in a position to define operations function, operations managers, and operations management, and distinguish those. So I think this is something that is straightforward and simple. Operations managers, these are people. So it's personnel in the business that are directly responsible for managing the operations function. These are people, operations managers. They are people who are responsible for carrying out those management tasks that you guys looked at in your first year. I'm sure you looked at planning, organizing, leading, and controlling as the 4 main management tasks. So the people that are directly responsible for those tasks in the operations function, those are the people that are referred to as operations managers. Then the operations function itself, this is the function in an organization. Like for example, in an organization, you may have a number of functions. You covered this in your chapter 6. I remember where you looked at a number of functions as was proposed by Henry Fayot, that an organization can have the finance function, operations function, human resources function. It can also have the marketing function, purchasing and supply function, and so forth. So we are saying for operations function, this is the function in an organization that is primarily aimed and that primarily focuses on the utilization of resources to manufacture products or to render services. So this is that particular function in an organization that is concerned with converting inputs into output. Then we also have operations management. I'm sure in chapter 6 you also defined management. And operations management is a process which involves operations managers' activities and decisions and their responsibilities that tie in with the execution of the operations function. So basically, operations management, this is a process of managing the operations function. Then we move on to the operations management model, which I believe you guys looked at in your chapter 1 when you did your first year, when you looked at the simplified transformation model, where you have your inputs, then there's the transformation process, and you have your output. And the inputs, transformation process, and then you have your output. So in terms of the inputs, you need to know what constitutes inputs. For purposes of this course, you need to know what constitutes inputs. You also ought to know what happens in the transformation process. You also ought to know the output. How does it differ? Because output can be in the form of products. It can also be in the form of services. So you ought to know how those differ. So in terms of the inputs, basically we are looking at those resources that you guys looked at in your first year. And you were saying these resources are limited. The materials, the natural resources, customers or clients, which are people, and in most cases they will need to be converted, so that if one was looking not so good, when they receive a service through the transformation process, when the process ends, at least they should be looking a bit better. I'm sure that works with saloons. That works also with people, like with people receiving services, maybe when they are not feeling that well, they visited a doctor, a dentist, or whatever we may think of, then they receive a service. After that, they will come out transformed. Information is also a resource. It can be received, be it in the form of data, then after it has been transformed, it can then become more useful. We also ought to know that in transforming resources or inputs, there's need for human resources, there's need for equipment, there's now need for technology also. So those, they come in as aids to the transformation process. Then after the transformation process, what comes out are obviously products and services. And I said earlier, you need to be in a position as a business management student to distinguish between products and services. What are the differences? There are more than 9 differences between products and services in your textbook, and you need to be in a position to distinguish those two. Operations management strategies and performance objectives. Operations managers, they also ought to develop strategies and performance objectives just like other managers in organizations. And these strategies and performance objectives, they should focus on customers' needs, and managers should continuously formulate strategies and objectives to maintain and to strengthen the competitive position of the organization, as well as the organization's customer base. So it's like, as they develop these strategies, they should focus on customers' needs. I'm sure in chapter 1, when you did your first year, you were told that businesses, they need customers. Customers also need businesses, because customers receive products and services from businesses. But for businesses to also survive, they also need customers. Hence, there is that need for managers to focus on customers' needs, to ensure that whenever they are coming up with a product or whenever they are developing a service, that product or service will definitely meet the customer's needs, which you guys in your first year, I'm sure you agreed, or if others didn't agree, you finally agreed that those needs, customers' needs, they are just unlimited. They are just unlimited. So businesses ought to focus on those customers' needs. You need to identify them, understand them, then you satisfy them. And once you focus on those customers' needs, you will always have a customer in your business. And whatever you produce will be bought by someone who needs to satisfy their own particular needs. So when you focus on those needs, you must also ensure that you maintain or you strengthen the competitive advantage of the organization, so that the organization continues to be seen as better in the eyes of customers than its competitors. And that will then help the organization to have more customers than its competitors. So there are a number of clients' needs from an operations perspective that we ought to know. So I just need 6 people who count. One will say 1, the other one says 2. I will just need 6 that I will ask simple questions with options. So I just need 6 people. Can I have those counting 1 up to 6? Who is 1? You can type in the chat box. Guys, we don't have time. Can we quickly do it? You can type your name in the chat box. Okay. I see Milile. Who is 2? Please quickly do so, so that we move on. Okay, so I'll ask, it's Milile. Is that the correct pronunciation of the first name? Hello? Okay, so I'll ask Milile to answer on this particular question that I'm going to ask here. Assuming you are given two products at the same price, but, okay, apologies for that, it's a he. Assuming you are given two products at the same price, but the only difference is quality. The other one is of higher quality and the other one is of poor quality. Which product would you go for? Which product would you choose? Okay, so he's saying he would choose a product of higher quality. Do we have anyone who would go for a product of poor quality, even if they are offered at the same price? It seems the silence and people agree that they would go for a product of higher quality. So what it simply means is that in a normal world, customers or clients basically prefer higher quality. Maybe the reason why some end up buying products of poor quality is that there may be variations in terms of costs. But where costs and all other factors are equal, people would prefer products of higher quality. Then also, it seems, unfortunately, there was only one person who had indicated willingness to answer, others didn't indicate. Also, the other need for clients or for customers is that of lower costs. That if they are given an option to pay more or to pay less for a product, clients will be willing to pay less or to spend less for a product. So they have that need of less costs or of lower costs. They do not want to pay more for a product if quality is the same. Then there is also that need for shorter lead time. That shorter lead time, basically, I think it's important to describe what or to explain what lead time is. Lead time is the period between the time from which a product is requested for by a customer or by a client to the time at which the client or the customer actually receives the product. So that waiting time is what we are referring to as the lead time from an operations perspective. So clients basically have that need for a shorter lead time. They do not want to wait for a longer time in order to receive a product that they need. So in case you are not able to provide that particular product faster, they will be willing to move away and look for another supplier or for another business that will be able to offer them that product at a much quicker pace. They also expect greater adaptability. Adaptability, we're looking at flexibility. To say if they had put in their order and they decide to change it, be it in terms of the nature of products, be it in terms of the number of products that they want, be it in terms of whatever other variation, they expect businesses to be flexible. They expect businesses to quickly adapt. So if a business is not that flexible, customers may also decide not to stick to that particular business. Then another need of clients also is lower variability. Lower variability, to say if I use the product maybe a year ago and it worked well for me. If I use it today, it should perform in the same manner or more or less in the same manner that it performed the other time I used it. It should perform more or less in the same manner as the other time that you have used it. Then another need also, so that lower variability is basically higher reliability, that the products ought to be reliable. If you use the product without side effects and now you want to use it again, it should still not have side effects. It should perform the same in the same manner. I'm sure those that had been in Alice and buy bread that is not branded, do we have those who buy bread that is not branded, be it in Spar or in ShopRite? That no-name bread, do we have any people who buy that one? Okay, so maybe it's only me. So I know in Alice that if you want to buy that no-name bread, in one supermarket, it seems they maintain the quality of that particular bread. But in the other supermarket, which I will not name, on one day the bread will be fine, on the other day it will have too much salt. If you try it the other day, it may have too much yeast. But in one of those two supermarkets, you will also find that they are consistent in terms of how their bread tastes, in terms of the size and everything. But with the other, it differs. So now customers, they actually prefer that variability to be low. Those changes to be lower, so that they can depend on the product to say, no, if the bread taste is fine and it's nice, we know that that's how it is. And if it doesn't, we also know that's how it is. But now if you change it here and there, it confuses customers and we don't know when to buy it and when not to buy it. Then generally customers also prefer a higher level of service. We prefer a higher level of service. That applies to everyone. So these clients' needs, they also inform performance objectives. They also inform performance objectives. So if you want a higher quality, managers ought to know that they have to do things right the very first time. So it becomes an operations objective to do things right the very first time. If you want to reduce costs in an organization, it becomes an operations objective to actually do things cost effectively. Cut costs, cut the costs. If you want shorter lead time, then your performance objectives, operations performance objective, would then become that you ought to do things faster, do things fast. To be adaptable or to be flexible, you also ought to know that you need to change things quickly where there is need. Lower variability to ensure that things do not change, your quality do not change, you ought to do things right every time. And to improve service, what you ought to need to do from an operations perspective is that you ought to do things better so that you can improve the service, you can better the service. So you ought to know the client's needs, which we see here as the positive results in this particular slide, that they can actually be merged with the operations management objectives. Those two can actually be merged. Managers can actually decide on what they should do in order to yield that particular positive result, which is also a customer's need from an operations perspective. Okay, then we move on to the transformation model, which we looked at earlier, the diagram. So this operations function is primarily concerned with the application of resources by means of a transformation process in order to provide the outputs, which we said can either be in the form of products or in the form of services, as we can see here. So we have the inputs, your resources, your materials, your customers and clients and information. Then we also have the aids, where we have your human resources, facilities and equipment, your technology, and obviously the output, we said it is products and services, and you ought to know the differences between these. Then it's also important for us to understand that different operations have different characteristics. And to distinguish those, we ought to know the 4 V's. The 4 V's, where we have your volume of output, we also have your variety of output, then we also have your variation of output, and obviously the visibility of output. And in terms of visibility of output, I think it's straightforward that in some cases, output can actually be visible, and in some cases, it cannot be visible, it will be invisible. So in terms of services, it is invisible. In terms of products, in terms of services, it is invisible. In terms of products, output can be visible. Then in terms of volume of output, by volume of output, we basically refer to the number of items that are produced by the operation over a period of time. So some operations, they produce a high number of products in terms of units at a given time. Yet for some operations processes, the volume is actually low, or the number of units that are produced is actually low. Then we also have variety. This basically refers to the range, the different types of products or units that are produced. It may also differ. Some operations processes produce a range or a variety, whilst some operations processes produce the same output. Then variation, in terms of variation, we are looking at the particular demand pattern of output, the demand pattern for output. So for certain products, the demand pattern does not change. But for certain products, the demand pattern actually changes. For example, in terms of the production of ice cream, you realize that in winter, the demand pattern will be lower, but in summer, demand will actually be higher. So in terms of production, that will also have an effect. So the implications of those 4 V's are volume, variety, variation, and visibility. Can actually be significant in terms of the costs of creating products and creating the services. So those that like economics, microeconomics, which is relevant for purposes of this, for purposes of operations management, you would understand that in terms of volume of output, there is an economic principle which is known as economies of scale, which we can summarize to say the more you produce, if you produce more, the cost of producing one particular unit goes down. That is, as you increase volume to a reasonable level, the cost of production per unit will actually be going down. That is economies of scale. So if you increase volume, in some instances, you will actually be able to reduce costs. That's why we are saying these have an effect on cost, a significant effect in terms of the costs that will be incurred by the organization. Also, if you are producing the same output, you may not need different machines and equipment. So that will also reduce the costs of cost in terms of investment that you will need. Then the other issue is also that issue of variation. You will not need to change the levels of production. It will also mean that it will not affect adversely in terms of your costs. But feasibility, that one we cannot be able to explain it in terms of costs. So are there any questions concerning what we have covered so far, so that we know that the next time we meet, you guys will be looking at the classification of process types for manufacturers and also for service providers. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? It will be good if people ask questions. I appreciate people who speak, because I believe that learning takes place more effectively if people participate, if people ask questions, and we know that we are moving together. Okay, there's a question from Trinity. And the question is, say, can you briefly explain the difference between it's supposed to be variety of output and variation of output. I said in terms of variety, we are looking at the range of products that are produced. So products can differ in terms of shape, that's the variety. Differences in terms of shape, differences in terms of sizes, differences in terms of how those products generally look, in terms of design and so forth. That is the range. Is the operations process producing different types of products, or it is producing the same type of product? That is variety. So where we are producing different types of products, we will say there is high, variety is actually high. But where we are producing the same product, in terms of shape, in terms of size, in terms of color and everything, there is no variety. So that is variety. In terms of variation of output, we said we are mainly focusing on the demand patterns. So there are products whose demand patterns, or there are products that have their demand patterns not changing. That is to say, the demand is constant throughout the year. Then there are certain products that have their demand patterns changing, maybe by seasons. Hence, I gave an example of ice cream, because the demand pattern of ice cream, I know for sure that it changes. At some point in time, people demand more of it. Then in some instances, people actually forget that there is anything like ice cream that exists. So that also have an effect in terms of production. I'm not sure, Trinity, if I have been able to answer your question in distinguishing those two. Okay, thank you. Anyone else with a question? Anyone else with a question? Okay, guys, it is advisable that you study the material also before you come for these sessions. I had requested you to actually read this content before you joined the session. I hope you did, and I hope the lecture assisted. But before I close, it will not be fair for me not to share this wonderful opportunity with you. There's an opportunity for you guys to make 100,000 rand in this year that you can actually be someone who has 100 rand, 100,000 rand in their account. I'm not sure if you have seen that opportunity. How many have seen it? Without gambling, like you can make 100,000 rand simply because you are a student. How many people have seen that opportunity? How many people have not seen that opportunity? How many people would want to get that particular 100,000 rand? You can indicate in the chat box. You can also unmute your mic. You see what I'm noting here? It seems some people are not able to use Blackboard Collaborate. They are not able to unmute their mics. They are not able to use the chat box. Please ask a friend so that you will also be able to participate in the class. Okay, guys, there's an opportunity that has been distributed in the daily bulletin. The Entrepreneurship Intervarsity, where you are requested, if you have a business that is already operating, you can enter that competition with your business that is already operating. If you do not have a business that is already operating, you can come up with an innovative and good business idea that can be converted into a business, a proper business. So you can still enter the competition with your business idea. You are given an opportunity to pitch and present your idea in 3 minutes, just 3 minutes. You don't stand in front of people for a very long time. You stand for just 3 minutes. You present your idea, how you will make money and how your idea will be the best and how your idea will be a success in just 3 minutes. And you will not be asked a lot of questions. You will only be asked questions for 2 minutes. And you stand a chance to become the winner. The competition is actually a national competition open to all students. You have the opportunity to become a winner. If you win in a particular category, you win 20,000 rands. If you win at the national level, if you become the national winner, you will walk away with 100,000 rands. So be on the lookout. Do not be on the lookout. Actually, see in the daily bulletin, there is an advert for the Entrepreneurship Intervarsity. Please read it. Register your idea. If you do not have a business that is already operating, register your idea so that you can compete, get an opportunity to pitch your business. We will also have people who will train you guys on how to present your business. But what is needed for now is to register your idea. So you just need a very good business idea that you know that it will work and it will be a success. You register it for the competition and that will be it. You present it, you make your money. So I am challenging you to go for that opportunity. It's closing on the 30th, but you can use this time between now and next week to actually register your idea so that you will also have that opportunity to shine. Even if you do not win the competition, there are a lot of opportunities. You have an opportunity to meet with other business leaders. You will have an opportunity to also share and present your business idea, which is good experience also, because it prepares you for the future. If you proceed to the national level, even if you do not win, you will be able to meet with successful business leaders. And that is an opportunity for you as a business management student not to miss. So I'm challenging you to read the daily bulletin and enter the Entrepreneurship Intervarsity. That's it from me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I will be able to answer. Okay, guys, if there are no questions, thank you so much for attending. We attend again next week. Next week, it will be Tuesday at 9. Thank you also again for understanding. Thank you also for understanding. Oh, I see Liko. You want to say something? Please go ahead.
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can those that are not speaking please mute their mic? Yes, you can go ahead. Liko, you can go ahead. Liko, I think you are now on mute. You can unmute and proceed. Liko? Oh, I see the suddenly it doesn't have a connection. Okay, so maybe you will let me know of what you wanted to say, even in the group, in the WhatsApp group. Thank you guys for logging in. We will see you, or I will see you in the next lecture, which will be on Tuesday. And as I said, I urge you to join also the competition, the entrepreneurship intervarsity. Look for it and go for it. So thank you for attending.